You want to know the truth? I didn't think she'd last a week. I'm not proud of that, but I'm telling you straight because if I dress it up, then the rest of the story means nothing. When the humans first came aboard the Vesh coral, there were 4 of them, and 3 of them looked like soldiers. Big shoulders, loud laughs, the kind of stride that takes up a whole corridor. And then there was her, standing a half step behind the others, hood up, hands in her sleeves, looking at the floor like the floor had done something interesting. My name doesn't matter much for this. My people call ourselves the Tarn. You'd say I looked like a tall person made of gray leather with too many fingers and eyes that sit a little too far apart. I worked the cargo deck. 12 cycles I'd been on that ship. I'd seen a lot of species come and go. I thought I'd seen everything. I hadn't seen humans, not up close, not the way I was about to. So let me take you back. Let me put you on that deck with me because I still remember the smell of it. That cold ozone smell the docking bay always had, like a storm that never quite breaks. The Vesh coral was a galactic Concord patrol carrier. If that means nothing to you, picture a city that flies. 3 kilometers of gray metal and humming engines, crewed by maybe 9,000 souls from 40 different worlds. We weren't a warship exactly. We were the ship they sent when something needed sorting out and nobody wanted to admit it was a war yet. The Conquered didn't love humans back then. I want to be honest about that too. Earth had only joined the bigger galaxy a few generations before, and most species treated them like a child who'd wandered into an adult's argument. Small, soft, short-lived. Most of us figured they'd been let in out of pity or because somebody important owed somebody a favor. The Galactic Marines, the real soldiers, the pride of the Conquered, those were the Vor. 7 feet of muscle and bone plating, raised from birth to fight. When the Vor walked the deck, people moved. You didn't even think about it. Your body just stepped aside before your mind caught up. And the Vor did not like sharing their ship with humans. That was the situation when the 4 of them came up the ramp. I was logging supply crates when they arrived, so I had a clear view. The 3 big humans, I learned their names later, Calder and Boone, and a woman called Iana. They came in talking, joking, knocking shoulders. Boone tripped on the lip of the ramp and laughed at himself, this big booming sound that filled the bay. They seemed friendly. Too friendly, honestly. Like they hadn't read the room. Like they didn't know how much we'd already decided to dislike them. And the 4th one came up last. She was small even for a human, maybe a head shorter than the others. She wore a gray field jacket 2 sizes too big, the sleeves pulled down over her hands, and she kept her eyes low. When the deck officer barked their assignments, the 3 big ones answered, "Sir," loud and crisp. She just nodded. I remember thinking, that one won't make it. The galaxy eats quiet things. Her name was Wren. I didn't learn it from her. I learned it from a manifest. Specialist W. Hale. No rank insignia I recognized. No commendations listed. The other 3 had service records as long as my arm. Hers said almost nothing. 3 lines and a blank space where the rest should have been. A blank space, I figured, meant nothing happened to her worth writing down. I was wrong about what the blank space meant, but I'll get there. For the first few cycles, she barely existed. The big 3 threw themselves into ship life, drinking in the mess, arm wrestling the Tarn dockhands, trying to learn the Vor greeting and getting it hilariously wrong. People started to warm to them, a little, the way you warm to a loud dog that won't stop wagging. Boone in particular. You couldn't help liking Boone. He'd carry your crates without being asked. He'd remember your name. Wren did none of that. She found the corners. The maintenance crawl space above the cargo deck that became her spot. I'd see her up there with her knees pulled up, watching the bay with those dark, steady eyes. Not hiding exactly. More like a thing that was used to being still. Used to waiting. The first time I spoke to her, it was an accident. I was hauling a coolant drum and I lost my grip. The thing was heavier than its label said. Somebody had marked it wrong, and it came down toward my foot. And I knew in that frozen half-second that it was going to break bones. It didn't reach me. She was just there. I hadn't heard her drop down from the crawl space. I hadn't heard her cross the deck. One moment empty air, the next moment a small gray-jacketed human with both hands flat against a drum that weighed more than she did, riding the momentum, turning it, setting it down soft as a sleeping child. I stared at her. She straightened up, pushed her hood back an inch and looked at me, really looked for the first time, and her eyes were the calmest thing I'd ever seen on a living face. "You okay?" she asked. Her voice was quiet, almost flat, but not cold, just careful, like a person who'd learned to spend words the way you spend your last coins. "Yes," I said. "Thank you, that was how did you?" But she'd already pulled her hood back up and turned away. I stood there for a long while, looking at that drum doing the weight in my head. I knew what my body could lift. I knew what the big humans could lift. That drum was past both. I told myself she'd gotten lucky. The angle, the leverage, I told myself a lot of things. She went back up to her crawl space and folded herself into the dark, and I went back to work, and I didn't think about it again. For a while. Here's a thing about quiet people that the loud galaxy never understands. Quiet is not weak. Quiet is just a door that's closed, and you have no idea what's behind a closed door until something forces it open. The thing that forced Ren's door open had a name. His name was Drukhel. Drukhel was Vor, a sergeant, the kind of soldier they put on recruitment posters if the Vor made recruitment posters, which they didn't, because the Vor believed advertising was for the weak. He stood nearly 8 feet. His bone plating had old scars across it that he was proud of. He'd fought in 3 campaigns and he let everyone know it, in the way some people let you know things without ever quite saying them out loud. Drukhel hated the humans, not the loud generic hate either. He decided personally that Earth's inclusion in the conquered was an insult to every soldier who'd bled for it. And a patrol ship is a small world. When a being that size decides to hate something, the hate doesn't stay in one place. It seeps. It gets into the air. He started with Boone, because Boone was the friendliest, and the friendly ones are the easiest to hurt. Little things at first. A shoulder check in the corridor that knocked Boone into a wall. A tray accidentally tipped in the mess. Boone took it with that big easy smile, which somehow made Drukhel angrier, because the whole point of a shoulder check is that the other person is supposed to feel small, and Boone refused to. Then it stopped being little. I saw the mess hall thing. I was 3 tables away. It was a standard rotation, humans, Tarn, a couple of the blue Sethrid engineers, all eating at the long benches under the cold lights. The big 3 humans sat together. Ren sat at the end of their table, slightly apart, the way she always was, a bowl of something gray in front of her that she wasn't really eating. Drukhel came in with 2 of his Vor. They didn't get food. That was the first sign. Vor always ate. If a Vor walks into a mess hall and doesn't get food, he came for something else. He walked the length of the room slow, letting everyone feel him coming. He stopped at the human table. He looked down at Boone. "You're in my seat," Drukhel said. There was no assigned seating. Everyone knew that. Boone knew it too, but Boone, bless him, just looked up and smiled and said, "Plenty of room, Sergeant, pull up a bench." Drukhel picked up Boone's tray and turned it over onto the floor. The mess hall went quiet. Not all at once, quiet spreads in waves, table to table, like a light dimming. Within a few seconds you could hear the hum of the recyclers and nothing else. Boone looked at his food on the floor, then he looked up, and to his credit, to the credit of all 3 of them, they didn't go for it. They didn't take the bait. Calder put a hand on Boone's shoulder. Iana said low, "Leave it, Boone, not worth it." They were trying to be the bigger people, in a room full of beings literally bigger than them. Drukhel didn't want bigger people. He wanted a reaction. So when he didn't get one, he reached down, grabbed Boone by the collar and lifted him clean off the bench. One arm. Held him up like you'd hold a kit by the scruff. "On Vor ships," Drukhel said, "we do not let animals eat at the table." And that's when she moved. I want you to understand something. I had watched Ren for cycles by then. I had built a whole picture of her in my head. Small, quiet, lucky with a coolant drum. Probably some kind of technician they'd brought along to fix things. A clerk in a soldier's jacket. What I saw next did not fit that picture. What I saw next broke the frame the picture lived in. She didn't shout, she didn't stand up fast, she just set her spoon down, carefully, lined it up beside the bowl like neatness mattered, and then she stood and she walked around the table and she stopped in front of Druckhill, this little gray-jacketed human, looking up at 8 feet of war. "Put him down," she said. Quiet, so quiet that half the room leaned in to hear it. Druckhill laughed. Of course he laughed. It came out of him like rocks falling. The two Vor behind him laughed too, and honestly, most of the room wanted to laugh because the picture was absurd. It was a child telling a mountain to move. "Or what?" Druckhill said. He was still holding Boone in the air. "Little one, or what?" She didn't answer that. She just kept looking at him. And there was something in how she looked at him. I've spent a long time trying to find the word for it. It wasn't anger. Anger would have been easy to dismiss. It wasn't fear, though everyone expected fear. It was patience. The patience of someone who already knows how a thing ends and is just waiting for the other party to catch up. Druckhill saw it too. I think that's what made him let go of Boone, not mercy, but the small, animal part of him that didn't like that look. He dropped Boone back onto the bench and turned his full attention to her, and now he wasn't laughing anymore. "You want to discipline a Vor," he said. "Then we go to the ring, tomorrow, open deck, you and me. And when I am done, your little tribe goes back to your little dirt ball, and we never speak of letting your kind into the Concord again." He was so sure. You have to understand how sure he was. To him this wasn't a fight. It was a formality, a public lesson. He'd already won it in his head. The ring was just where he'd collect. The whole mess hall was waiting for her to back down. Even the big three were half out of their seats, ready to pull her away, to say she didn't mean it. "Sergeant, she's tired. We'll handle it." Ren tilted her head, just slightly. "Okay," she said. And she picked up her bowl, and she walked out of the mess hall, and she left the entire room sitting in a silence so complete I could hear my own heart's beating. That night, nobody could talk about anything else. The cargo deck buzzed with it. The engineering bays buzzed with it. Even the bridge crew, I heard, were laying odds, though odds is generous, because nobody was betting on the human. The Sethrid engineers had a pool going on how many seconds she'd last. The high number was 9. The low number was 2. I found the big three near the maintenance crawlspace, arguing in low voices. They didn't see me at first. "Has to back out," Calder was saying. "Druckill'll kill her, not even on purpose. He'll hit her once and that's it." "She's not gonna back out," Iana said. "You know she's not." "Then we report it, go over his head. The captain." "The captain hates us as much as Druckhill does," Boone said quietly. His voice was different now. The easy warmth had gone out of it. "If we run to command, we prove every word they've said about us. That humans can't take it, that we need protecting." He shook his head. "That's worse than losing." "It's not worse than her dying, Boone." That's when I cleared my throat and they all turned, 3 sets of round human eyes, and I'll never forget how young they looked in that moment. Scared for her. Really scared. "Forgive me," I said. I worked the deck, I saw what happened, I wanted to ask your friend, Ren, is she, what is she? She isn't a technician." The 3 of them looked at each other. Something passed between them, some silent conversation I wasn't part of. Finally Iana spoke. "No," she said, "she's not a technician." "Then what?" "You ever heard," Boone said, "of the long night?" I had, everyone in the Concord had, in the way you've heard of a disaster on a world you'll never visit. The long night was a human thing. A war back when Earth was new to the galaxy and a hostile fleet, the Karn, a species that's mostly gone now, had decided humans would make good slaves. The Karn had hit Earth hard. Orbital bombardment. Ground invasion. 3 years of it before help came. Most of the galaxy had assumed Earth would simply end. A young, soft species against a war fleet. The math was the math. Earth had not ended. That was the part nobody could explain. The Karn had landed 2 million soldiers and gotten almost none of them back. She was there, Iana said, for all of it start to finish. I did the numbers in my head. The long night that was a long time ago, a human lifetime ago almost. How old is she? I asked. Older than she looks, Calder said. There was a program during the war when things got bad enough. He stopped, started again. When you're losing and you can't make more soldiers fast enough, you make different ones, better ones. You take volunteers and you change them, what they could carry, how fast they healed, how long they'd live. He looked at the floor. How much they could take before they broke. There were a lot of those volunteers at the start. There aren't many left. Why not? Because most of them died winning, Boone said. The program had a name. Officially it was something with a lot of syllables. The soldiers just called them the quiet ones, because after what they did, what they had to do, they didn't talk much. You don't after. There's not a lot left to say. I looked up instinctively toward the crawlspace, toward the dark fold where a small gray-jacketed human spent her nights folded up and watching, and waiting, with the patience of someone who already knows how a thing ends. And she agreed to this fight, I said. She didn't agree to a fight, Iana said quietly. She agreed to teach a lesson. There's a difference. You'll see it tomorrow. I didn't sleep. I don't think anyone on that deck slept. The fight was set for the open deck, the big hangar, cleared of ships, the one space on the Vesh coral large enough to hold a crowd, and it held one. By the time the cycle turned, there must have been 2,000 beings packed along the gantries and the deck edges. Tarn, Sethrid, a whole block of Vor standing in their ranks already celebrating. I'd never seen the hangar that full, not for a ceremony, not for anything. Word had gotten out, you see. Not just a human is fighting Drukhel, the other word, quiet one. The Vor didn't believe it. To them it was a human story, a fairy tale Earth told to feel less small. But the rest of us, the ones who'd been in the galaxy long enough to know that the universe is bigger and stranger than any one species' pride, some of us wondered. Drukhel walked out first. The Vor block roared for him. He raised his arms, turned a slow circle, soaked it in. He'd painted his bone plating for the occasion, old victory marks in red. He looked exactly like what he was, the most dangerous thing most of us had ever stood near. Then the far doors opened, and Wren came out. She'd taken off the big gray jacket. That was the first surprise. Underneath it she wore a plain dark training shirt, and for the first time you could see her arms, her shoulders, and they were, I don't have a good way to say this. She was small. She was built small. But there was a density to her, a quality the eye couldn't quite name, like a stone that's heavier than a stone that size should be. She didn't strut. She didn't raise her arms. She walked to the center of the cleared deck the same way she'd crossed the cargo bay to save my foot, quiet, unhurried, already somewhere ahead of the rest of us. The Vor laughed at her size. The laughter rolled around the hangar. She didn't seem to hear it. The big three stood at the deck edge. Boone had his fists clenched so tight his knuckles had gone white. Iana wasn't looking at the ring. She was looking at the Vor block, at the faces, like she was memorizing them. Calder just kept whispering something under his breath. A prayer, maybe. Humans do that. The deck officer who'd drawn the unlucky job of refereeing stepped between them. He was Sethrid, blue and nervous, and his voice cracked when he asked formally whether both combatants understood that the bout was to first surrender, severe injury, or... He didn't finish the third option. He didn't have to. Everyone knew the third option. I understand, Wren said. Drukhel didn't bother to answer. He just cracked his neck, a sound like timber splitting, and grinned down at her with every tooth he had. The officer raised his hand, held it. The whole hangar held its breath with him, 2,000 beings, 40 worlds, all leaning over the edge of the same moment. And then his hand came down. And Drukhel moved first. Drukhel moved first. I want to describe it properly because most of you have never seen a vor move at full speed and the recordings don't do it justice. A vor is 8 feet of muscle and bone armor, and you'd think something that big would be slow. It isn't. When Druckhill came off his back foot, he covered the space between them in less time than it takes to blink. One step. His arm came around in a hook that could have caved in a bulkhead. The whole hangar surged forward to watch the small human get erased. She wasn't there. I don't mean she dodged exactly. Dodging is a thing you see, a lean, a duck, a shuffle to the side. This wasn't that. One moment she stood in the path of his fist, and the next moment she stood a half step to his left, and the space between those two moments was just gone. My eyes couldn't fill it in. His fist hit the air where she'd been, and the sound of it, that whump of displaced air, was louder than anything she did. Druckhill didn't stop. He pivoted through the other arm, an uppercut this time, the kind that would have taken her head clean off her shoulders. She caught it. She caught his wrist, this little gray shape, both hands closing around a forearm thicker than her whole body, and she stopped it, dead, mid-swing. All that mass, all that fury, and it just halted. Druckhill's own momentum nearly buckled his knee, because when you swing that hard and the target doesn't give, the force has to go somewhere, and it went back into him. The hangar made a sound, not a cheer, not a gasp, a kind of collective intake of breath, 2,000 throats at once, the sound a crowd makes when the thing it came to watch turns out to be a different thing entirely. The vor block stopped laughing. That was the first crack in it. I was watching them, I couldn't help it, and I saw the exact instant the laughter died in their faces. Up until then it had been theater to them. A human had gotten above herself, and Druckhill was going to set the universe right. But you can't laugh at a being who just caught a vor's fist barehanded. There's nothing funny in it. There's only the cold realization that the story you believed about the world might not be the true story. Druckhill ripped his arm free. She let it go, didn't fight to hold it, and stumbled back a pace. And for the first time I saw something cross his face that I'd never imagined seeing on a vor. Confusion. He recovered fast, give him that. He was a soldier to the bone, and a soldier doesn't stand around being confused, he adjusts. Druckhill squared up again. Lower this time, more careful, the grin gone, he'd recalibrated. The little human wasn't prey. Fine. He'd fought real opponents before. He knew how to fight things that fought back. He came in again, and this time it was beautiful, in the way that violence can sometimes be beautiful. A combination. 3 strikes, a feint, all of it flowing. The technique of a being who'd trained for war since before he could walk. Any one of those blows would have ended most opponents in the Concord. Ren read all of it. That's the only word for what she did. She didn't block much. Blocking takes effort. Blocking is for when you're behind the action. She was ahead of it. She slipped the feint before it finished forming. She turned her shoulder so the second strike skated off it. The third she stepped inside under his reach, into the one place a being that size can't easily hit, and she put one open palm against his chest plate. She didn't punch, she pushed. Druckhill left the ground. 8 feet of vor. I'm telling you, he came off his feet and traveled not far, 2 body lengths maybe, but he flew, and he landed on his back hard enough that the deck rang like a struck bell. The painted victory marks scraped against the metal. He skidded. The hangar lost its mind. Now it was a cheer, but a confused one, a divided one. The Sethrid were screaming. The Tarn near me were pounding the gantry rail. But a lot of the crowd didn't know what to do with itself, because they'd come to watch one story and they were being shown another, and the human heart of it, the thing none of us had words for yet, was just starting to land. The big 3 were on their feet at the deck edge. Boone had both hands pressed to the top of his head, mouth open. Calder was laughing this stunned, helpless laugh, and Iana wasn't celebrating at all. She was watching Ren with an expression I can only call grief, and I didn't understand it then. I understand it now. Druckhill got up. Of course he got up. A lesser fighter would have stayed down or surrendered or at least taken a moment. Not him. He rolled to his feet in one motion, and now the confusion was gone, and what replaced it was worse. Now he was afraid, and a being like Drukhel does not know what to do with fear except turn it into rage. He stopped fighting like a soldier. He started fighting like an animal. He roared and charged, no technique now, just mass and speed and the intent to crush. He grabbed for her, got a fistful of her shirt and slammed her down against the deck with everything he had. The whole hangar felt the impact through their feet. He drove a fist down at her head. A blow that would have ended her. She caught that one too, on her forearm, and the sound it made, bone armor on human bone, was a crack that echoed off the gantries, and for one terrible second I was sure her arm had shattered. It hadn't. She turned her wrist, trapped his arm against the deck, and then she did something I still see when I close my eyes. She brought her knees up between their bodies, planted both feet against his chest, and she kicked, and she sent 8 feet of enraged Vor tumbling backward over her head like he weighed nothing at all. And then she was up, on her feet before he'd stopped rolling, and she didn't press the advantage. She didn't pounce. She just stood there, breathing a little harder now, and waited for him. Always waiting, you see it. That was the thing about her. She never started anything. She just refused to let it end the wrong way. I have to tell you about the silence. There's a moment in any fight where the crowd realizes how it's going to go. You can feel it arrive. It's not when the last blow lands, it's before that, a turn in the air, when everyone watching stops hopping and starts knowing. That moment came, and when it came, the hangar went quiet again, but it was a different quiet than before. Before, it had been the quiet of a crowd watching something amazing. This was the quiet of a crowd watching something true. The Vor block had gone completely still. 200 of the proudest soldiers in the Concord, and not one of them was making a sound. They were watching one of their own, their sergeant, their poster, the most dangerous thing most of us had ever stood near, get taken apart by a being a third his size, and they were learning in real time that everything they'd believed about the shape of the galaxy had a flaw in it. And Drukhel kept getting up. That's the part I want you to sit with, because here's where the story stops being about how strong she was and starts being about something else. He got up again, slower. There was blood at the corner of his mouth, Vor blood, dark and thick. His chest plate had a crack in it from her palm strike. He should have yielded. The smart thing, the survivable thing, was to put up a hand and say enough. Everyone in the hangar knew it. I think even Drukhel knew it. But he couldn't. Because if he yielded to her, in front of his block, in front of 40 worlds, then the lie he'd built his whole life on, that strength meant his kind and weakness meant theirs, that lie died with him standing there. And some beings would rather die than let a lie die. So he came again, and every time she put him down, not cruelly. That's what got into people's chests, I think, what turned the crowd. She wasn't enjoying it. There was no triumph on her face, no contempt. Every time she dropped him, there was something almost gentle in it, the way you put down a thing that was hurting itself. She'd had 100 chances to break him, to crack that skull, to snap that arm, to end it permanently and earn the cheer. She didn't take a single one. She just kept refusing to lose, and refusing to destroy him, holding both of those things at once in those small, steady hands. The 8th time he went down, he didn't get up right away. He was on his knees, heaving. The paint had scraped off most of his plating. The victory marks were just smears now. And the hangar was so quiet you could hear him breathing, this wet, ragged sound. Ren walked over to him, slow. The whole crowd tensed. Here it comes, the finish, the moment she takes his head and proves her point forever. She crouched down in front of him, at his level, and she said something. I was too far to hear it. For years I didn't know what she said. But I found out, eventually. Boone told me, much later, because Boone had been close enough, and I'll give it to you the way he gave it to me, because it's the heart of the whole thing. She said, I'm not your enemy. I never was. You picked a fight with the one person on this ship who understands exactly what you're afraid of. Drukhel lifted his head, looked at her. And she said, You think if humans are strong, then the Vor aren't special anymore. I get it. We thought the same thing once about everyone bigger than us. We were wrong, so are you. There's enough room in this galaxy for both our kinds to be strong, but you have to let go of the part of you that needs us to be weak. She stood up, held out a hand to him to help him up. The whole hangar held its breath, 40 worlds watching to see what the Vor would do. And this is where I have to stop, because what happened next is its own thing, and it deserves its own telling. But I'll leave you here on the edge of it, the way we were all left on the edge of it, 2,000 beings packed along the gantries, a cracked and bleeding sergeant on his knees, and a small gray-shaped human standing over him with her hand held out. Not a fist, a hand. The fight was over. Everybody knew the fight was over. What none of us knew yet, what we were about to find out, was that the fight had never really been the point.